What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Renegade Animation on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host for this evening. Joining me, as always, is my co-captain, Cameron.
Howdy, howdy.
Now, last week we had a very news/preview heavy episode. So this week we're just focusing on reviews. And boy, the quality of each thing we're talking about this week, actually escalates from worst to best. So we start with Spirit Untamed, which is, as of this recording, now playing in theaters and on demand. We have the new anime Godzilla Singular Point, which is on Netflix. And we're finally getting to talk about Disney and Pixar's Luca, available on Disney+. So, all right, let's talk about Spirit Untamed.
Alrighty, Roo. This is the newest DreamWorks film from the famous studio. And, well, it's hard to explain what exactly this movie is. I know that sounds dumb. You know, it's like, oh, it's a sequel to the 2002 or 2003 movie, right? No, it is not. Then it's like, okay, well, is it a continuation or something of the Netflix TV series Spirit Riding Free? Nope. So, what is this film exactly? Because the DreamWorks has not been very clear about that. Essentially, it's a retelling of a little bit of the Spirit Riding Free TV series. Well, I say TV, but it's Netflix. Yeah, that's what we got. We got a not recap film, but definitely not something that's wholly related to either the film or the TV series.
You want to know what this is? This is the worst version of the Lego Ninjago movie.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. So essentially, where do we start with this? Okay, let's start with a little bit of a plot. Lucy Prescott is this young girl who lost her mother when she was a baby and was then sent away by her father, James Prescott, who's surprisingly voiced by Jake Gyllenhaal.
Of all people.
Yeah, of all people. Then years later, when she turns 10 or so, she comes back to where her father lives. As she's riding on the train, she sees the iconic Spirit, a wild stallion that, well, is riding along with his herd. Once she arrives at this new town, Miradero. This movie is wildly forgettable, so excuse me if I'm trying to force my memory to remember this movie. And as she arrives there, she encounters some new friends and an evil horse smuggler named Hendrix, voiced by Walton Goggins. What the heck are y'all doing in this movie? Anyway. If I let that simmer, I'm going to get mad. So then she finds out that the horse wranglers, led by Hendrix, caught Spirit, and then her bond with the wild horse begins. If Shark Tale wasn't already DreamWorks' worst movie, just on every level, I would make a very compelling argument and a very convincing argument. This might be DreamWorks' worst movie.
I'm going to agree with you, and I can already tell some people are raising their eyebrows because, most people know that I am, for lack of a better term, a DreamWorks shill. Barring a few exceptions, Shark Tale, Shrek the Third, this, I mostly have given favorable reviews to their filmography. I even think Home, that movie from 2015,
2015,
is far more watchable than this. And I feel bad for saying that because I know neither one of us are the target demographic, but
yes. So let's talk about a few positives.
Sure.
There are a few decent moments in this movie, like when Lucky Prescott is interacting with Spirit, bonding and such, like gaining his trust. Those moments are decent. It's very much a How to Train Your Dragon, but a Wild West setting.
I was getting those exact same vibes.
to give animators so much credit, the animation on the horses is quite good. They are expressive. Now, could they have maybe gone a little more cartoony, especially with how some of the characters look? Sure, but horses are so hard to animate. There are stories all over the place. I think James Baxter has a few. Like when I think how the story goes was he was teaching an animation class and someone asked him if he could animate a horse like on one of those large circus balls, and he was just like, no. Like that. I mean, that was one of the appeals of the original film. Whatever you have to say about the original 2002 film, it was gutsy for back then for DreamWorks to put out a film that basically had a character who did not talk, or at least directly talk, because they pulled a Thief and a Cobbler and had Matt Damon narrate. Like I said, horses are hard to draw. I am terrible at drawing horses. And they were able to get so much emotion out of that character in the original film, and they do that here too. And then later on, during a dream sequence, when they're like catching up to the train that the gang took with the horses, there's this cool sequence where they're riding on their horse. The three girls are riding on their horses, and the sky and the ground match, like with the cloud patterns and such.
Yeah, that whole sequence was probably my favorite.
You see it in like they almost show the entire thing in the trailer. So if that was your favorite part, well, you can watch it that way. While I understand this was a much lower budgeted film at around 30 million, or as far as we know, that's what they've said. I like the human animation, not all of it, but they do try to put in some moments of like more emotional acting per se.
Yeah,
I like the actors that play the three main girls. I like Isabella Merced, Lucky Prescott. I like Prue Granger, who's played by Marcy Martin. I like
McKenna
Abigail.
Grace.
McKenna Grace. I thought that out of all the actors, they did a great job. Okay, you know what? That's all that I have.
Just to piggyback off that, I think like as far as like some of the backgrounds go, a lot of like the best moments in the film are scenes like that take place during like a sunset, because they found a particular aesthetic that works well with this setting. And also I'll admit, like, I kind of got a little kick out of the climax. I thought it was fun enough for the story they were telling.
Yeah, no matter how critical we're going to be, this movie's overall harmless. Out of all the big budget animated films this year, it might be on the bottom, but since I've seen a lot more, it's not the worst out of the whole year.
I haven't seen as many, so this will be on my bottom, but I'm sure Cameron will fix that soon.
Oh, I will. And I also did like some of the musical moments, like when you first meet Spirit. I always like that chanting kind of thing. Some of the songs were okay. Unfortunately, that's all I have to say that are positive, because everything else, this movie is so boring, and it's like, it feels like it's going by the paces of what it needs to do, which is weird because the co-writer of this film is the creator of the Netflix series. It doesn't have any flair or pizzazz, and I would have been not as harsh on it as I am about saying that. But we've also seen Calamity, which is a way better female-focused Western.
Oh, easily.
And out of curiosity, I watched the first and like 1.5 episodes in the Netflix series. They do change a few things around, which is kind of interesting, because then they kind of make it a father-daughter, like their relationship is in strife, and he doesn't really know how to bond with her. She doesn't really know how to react with him. To be fair, that has potential.
It's also a story we've kind of seen time and time again.
And we're about to see that again with Belle, since, G-Kids is going to bring that film out. There's no nuance, or as much nuance as DreamWorks is able to put within their film. Like even Home had its moments near the end, and that film can be fairly obnoxious. The TV series is actually not bad, but that's beside the point. Really, like a lot of my issues outside of the story. First off, these villains are terrible. Not that like they're terrible people. They are.
They're terrible villains that I guess on the one hand I can understand like the appeal of casting Walton Goggins to play that character because he's played that character a couple times already. They do like nothing new that was even old back when Home on the Range did something similar.
It very much is like DreamWorks' answer to Home on the Range if they were making films that back when they were trying to like get everything out before Disney and Pixar because of pettiness. They just aren't threats either. They're easily beaten by 3 girls and their horses and by the adults. And like at no point outside of just catching them off guard do they feel like a threat. And they also have some of the worst lines. Like, oh God, I groaned when Walton Goggins' character was like, but that horse, man, he's got a lot of spirit in him. Speaking of the cast, this might be the most miscast movie I've seen from DreamWorks, only because I can think of 500 voice actors that could have replaced a lot of these big names. They don't really put in good performances, or at least performances that I would say were entertaining. Jake Gyllenhaal gives it his best, but his character has nothing to him. You could have easily just brought back Nolan North, who plays Lucky's dad in the TV series.
Or you could have cast like Maurice LaMarche or someone whose voice is a better fit for the character, because man, Jake Gyllenhaal rarely gives like a genuinely bad performance, but when he's miscast, he is basically left high and dry.
And then like you have like Julianne Moore, could have replaced her with Carrie Walgreen, who plays her character in the Netflix series. Andre Braugher could have replaced her with like Kevin Michael Richardson. There was no reason to have these big actors in these films. And like Gary Anthony Williams is in this. I get the young kids, but these big names, and they weren't even like major parts of the advertising. And this is DreamWorks. They're one of those studios that still thinks that like, hey, listing out the actors is going to be a big selling point.
When they don't even do that, that's when you know that they're gonna bury this movie into the ground.
It's not doing well either. It's so far has made $22 million, but that's still way under the $30 million budget, and who knows how much marketing they put out. I'm assuming that they thought they were going to get like a pretty good hit because, not a lot of competition, but now there is a lot of competition. They didn't have to deal with Raya and the Last Dragon or Luca, but now they have to deal with like what? A Quiet Place Part 2, Fast and the Furious, whatever else is going to be coming out or came out when this film originally was released. I get it. This film was made by an entirely different studio, but it just doesn't work here. It doesn't have that feeling of like how they handled the Captain Underpants production. It looks bland. And you look at the Netflix series and yeah, it looks like a CGI TV series, but it has this kind of cool painted look on everything. You don't get that here. The clouds look and the backgrounds look great.
Yeah,
but everything else,
the background's some of the best things in this movie. It's just kind of a shame that that's where most of their focus went.
And I would have been like forgiving of this movie if it had a better story, but it's every like, oh, I'm the outcast. I learned to tame the wild spirit. We've seen this before. DreamWorks has done this before. This kind of comes off like that time that George Lucas was talking about strange magic. And he was like, well, yeah, we're making strange magic because it's going to be like Star Wars for girls. And it's like,
but Star Wars is already for girls.
How to Train Your Dragon was already for like everyone. That's why, against their better judgment of how they make side characters, DreamWorks puts in a lot of side characters so you could have like a range of characters to connect to. I was just really bored by this movie. I'm trying to remember something else to talk about. It just felt like this whole film was undercooked from every point. The writing, the characters, the story, the animation. And it's funny that they hyped up that Taylor Swift song that played in the trailers, and it's not in the movie.
Was it even in the credits?
Nope.
Wow.
There was like a whole hype. It's like, oh man, Taylor Swift is going to release the song that was supposed to be attached to this movie. And then I guess they couldn't use it, or Taylor Swift says like, no. I just put out my most well-received album. I am not following it up with this.
One more positive thing I'll say, though. It was nice that this was dedicated to the memory of Kelly Asbury.
I was about to bring that up. That was a very nice credit at the very end of the movie. I wish they put it at the beginning, because he was, the co-director of the original film, who sadly passed away last year due to cancer. It was very touching, and that's why I can't really be mad about this movie, even though it's like we are dunking on it constantly. But you know what? We're being way more kind to it than a lot of reviews are, man.
Let me ask you something, because I just noticed that one thing that this movie and Luca have in common is that these are both feature film directorial debuts. At one point, does that no longer qualify as a free pass?
Well,
because you know what else was a directorial debut?
Luca.
Well, besides that, The Mitchells versus the Machines, and that's still my number one film of the year.
Same. I don't want to be too harsh on it, because I understand not everyone can be like a Tarantino or like the directors behind many of the best animated films from Disney's 90s period. But on the other hand, when other directorial debuts are happening this year and your source material isn't that great, whether that's because of like management or whatever, it's tough. I don't think you can use it too much as an excuse. I don't know. I'm not going to give it a full pass because of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. If we're just judging by films from this year, then no, absolutely not. It's not fair to say, oh, well, this is your first time, so we'll give you a pass. I mean, sure. For all we know, her next movie could be like one of my favorites of all time, but we gotta focus on the present. We gotta focus on what we have in front of us, and unfortunately, what we have in front of us just doesn't pass muster.
It doesn't, and I mean, like, I'll say this: I like this one more than Shrek the Third, but this movie is just a waste of talent, a waste of a studio's time.
And one more thing. I know that Universal is doing the whole 17-day theatrical window, but how come this one gets like the theatrical treatment when Boss Baby 2 will be available on Peacock the same day as its theatrical release, when it should have been the other way around?
That's right. It really should have been the reverse, because I'm sorry, the animation quality of this film is not up to theatrical standards. I understand that not everyone has $100 million Pixar budget, but when you're going to the theater, you expect a visual quality that you can't find at home. Spirit looks like a film that was meant to be on a streaming service via Netflix or Peacock. I say Netflix because that's where the Spirit series is. It doesn't look theatrical. I know everyone's like, every movie deserves a chance in the theater. Not this one. I disagree. I have other films that decided to stay in like the theatrical, like direct to video or direct to streaming service spots. I don't know why this one. Who was this movie made for?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not necessarily a sequel to the 2003 film. It's not even a continuation of the animated series. So unless like the idea is simply to introduce these characters to a new generation, well, Netflix, even when they cancel shows, like cancel their originals, it's not like those shows go away. They just, they'll still be on the surface. Like you can watch the animated series anytime you want. There's no reason why this movie needed to exist.
I can't think of a reason out of all the films to bring back a sequel for. Well, not even a sequel. Like Spirit, like the show's over. The original movie was a financial bomb, and there's a ton of elements to it that do not age well about it, and it wasn't that popular considering how it's doing now. It just seems like this was a bad idea. They needed something to release, and they had this, and they were like, okay, fine. I don't know. Maybe they couldn't make it a Peacock original because it was like too late. They already made the deal and whatnot. But this movie just makes Spirit look bad. DreamWorks look bad. Like DreamWorks, for all their flaws, for all the warts, can be a great studio. One of my favorite films from last year was The Croods: A New Age.
Yeah, that movie's awesome.
It's not like they can't do something about they can't make a quality film. They can, whether it's a more drama or action focused or more comedy focused. I'm just struggling to find a reason why people should watch this movie. If you're a fan of the original film, this isn't going to work for you. If you're a fan of the Netflix series, you will just watch the Netflix series, and it has a much better art style to it. Anyway, I think that's it.
I have pretty much washed my hands clean of this one.
And for some reason, I got called to task for some reason for this one movie on Twitter. I do not know why.
I'm sorry. I find it amusing how often you'll get attacked on Twitter for rightfully criticizing either things that do not need defending, or I don't know, for some reason you seem to attract the trolls and the bots.
Well, I don't know why it had to be Spirits. I could understand, like, if I got called to task for criticizing Earwig and the Witch or SpongeBob Sponge Out of Water. I could at least understand that. But Spirit, yeah, no. And what's worse is that, during Annecy, we forgot to bring this up. We saw a preview of the Boss Baby sequel that's coming out. And you could tell there's just so much more passion in that movie. There's more, pardon the pun, spirit in Boss Baby Family Business. I just don't know why this one had to get the defense for. It's like, how dare you? It's like when you find out that, like, if you dare criticize the Alpha and Omega franchise.
Oh boy.
Woof. Anyway, let's move on. I want to talk about some Godzilla.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Godzilla Singular Point is a Netflix original animated series co-produced by Bones Incorporated and Orange Co. Limited. Bones did like the traditional animation while Orange assisted with the CGI models. And basically this is a series that takes place in the year 2030, and it follows a young engineer named Yun Arikawa, voiced by John Yun Bosch. He works for the local do-it-all shop, the Otaki Factory, and he and his friend or coworker happens to investigate this Western-style house long thought abandoned. Mai Kamino, a graduate student studying imaginary creatures, investigates mysterious signals received from Misakiyoko, a former Saguno district administrative building. These two strangers, visiting completely different places as part of completely different investigations, both hear the same song. As they become united, they are led into a battle beyond imagination involving the whole world. So, Cameron, you are a bigger Godzilla fan than I am. I want to hear your general impressions first.
Well, if you know me, and I got so much flack for this last year when we talked about this show being announced. I'm very picky with how I want my Godzilla. Sometimes I will enjoy the more methodical, dramatic, cautionary tale, horror kind of version, like the original movie or like Shin Godzilla. But a lot of times I am a huge fan of the more campy films, the ones where it is this they're made because they want Godzilla to fight another giant monster. Whether there's like more substance behind the monster or not, that kind of depends on what movie you look at. And when I saw this show, this was, right after the Netflix Godzilla trilogy films by Polygon Pictures. And I was just not a fan. I hated those movies with a fiery passion. I thought they were boring. They didn't really have much to do with Godzilla if you took them out. And they were like the worst kind of Godzilla movie where they focused on human characters that were not interesting. And you were constantly wondering where the heck is Godzilla. This show, though, does everything that I love about a good Godzilla experience. It's wordy. It does focus on a lot of humans, but it's fun as heck to watch. It turns into more of like a monster invasion story than like a traditional Godzilla style story. Because something that I was really worried about was the fact that Godzilla himself does not appear until 2/3 of the way through this 13 episode season.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, when do we actually see him? Like episode 6, 7-ish?
I think like around 8. Like technically, like they take the Shin Godzilla route with his transformations. Like he starts out as that big red sea monster thing that attacks those mandras. And well, first of all, I thought that was Titanosaurus. And if you saw the tail, you wouldn't blame me for thinking that. Then it kind of evolves into different forms until it gets to that horrifying final form that looks like a mix of Shin Godzilla and Godzilla 2000. So then it's like, okay, well, is everything else good at least? Yes. Because they make the humans so much more interesting in this movie than they have been in like so many Godzilla movies. Because off the top of my head, I cannot think of or remember a single main character from a Godzilla movie, at least human wise. They all blend together, and that's kind of the point, but it's also like a huge problem. They're there just to push the story forward while having nothing to them.
This might be one of the first times where, as much as I love the monsters in the series, I'm actually finding myself more compelled by the human drama of it all. But that's also because I'm a big time travel nut. This kind of scratches that itch.
What works is that they find a way to balance out the humans and the monsters. Every episode, they are dealing with a monster or something. It's not just humans for like 3 episodes straight and then like, oh, finally, monsters. No, it's pretty much every episode. They are dealing with something, whether it's Rodan in this cool pterodactyl form, or what I thought was Gabara, but was not. The blue horned creature that they fought, or that would like keep showing up and then either getting killed or something. I think it's called like Salunga, which again, I thought this was Gabara when we first saw the teaser because it looks exactly like this monster, even though Gabara was more of a like Oni, an ogre like inspiration, but that horn, man. I have to say that the team behind this show gave more of a hoot about the Toho Monster Gallery than I think Toho has ever put interest in like over a decade, or really over almost 2 decades now.
Wow, that's saying something.
They really love Jet Jaguar because Jet Jaguar was probably one of the most polarizing or most hated characters of the original movies, though he has like a charming cult fan base. And he's actually not that bad of a character, y'all. Come on. Because Jet Jaguar keeps playing a major role with the humans having to deal with like Rodans or Anguirus or whatever else they have to deal with. It's really cool that they give these monsters time in the sun, because Mandra was very much like a C tier Godzilla character. You wouldn't care about him, but they showed up quite a lot. Same with the Rodan, same with Anguirus. Like the monster variety is great. Could it have been a little more varied? Yes. But they do have enough callbacks to make it interesting. Like the moths that appear, I think in the last episode, are like obvious callbacks to Mothra.
Of course.
In the ending credits sequence, they do show like Hedorah the smog monster and stuff like that. And even though that kind of annoys me that they shove like Biolante, Hedorah, Meganulon, Kumonga, Zone Fighter. That's a huge deep cut if you don't know who Zone Fighter is, which was essentially one of Toho's answers to try and make an Ultraman character. Or like King Caesar, Kiryu, Megalon. This show loves the Toho Monster Gallery. They even have plush dolls, that were based on the Godzilla animated series from the 90s and the Hanna-Barbera one.
Wow.
If you're not paying attention, you would miss it, but it's a lot of fun. And I think what helps, again, are the humans. They are constantly like moving the plot forward. They are constantly in like the focus, and they're always interacting. They're always doing something. They're not just waiting for the next convenient plot device human to pop up.
But Cameron, we all know who the best character is.
Who's the best character?
The artificial intelligence.
Which one, Jung or Pero 2?
Well, both, but I was specifically referring to Pero 2.
Yes, voiced by Cassandra Lee Morris in the English dub. Pero is a great AI that helps along with like trying to solve the mystery of exactly what's going on. The show does keep like a pretty solid philosophical theme over everyone, like with time travel, destiny, controlling the future, controlling your fate. It's not like my favorite kind of plot at times with Godzilla. Like I said, I just want Godzilla to fight another monster sometimes, you know. It was definitely interesting. Pero 2 helps a lot with that. And it helps that like Pero 2 has some of the most expressive animation out of a lot of the characters. And I also like Goro Ataki, who's voiced by Keith Silverstein. And like the English dub is really good. Like you got Erica Harlacher, you mentioned before, Johnny Young Bosch, Cassandra Lee Morris, Stephen Fu, Keith Silverstein, Billy Kametz plays that guy in the suit with the bowl cut that you meet early on. You have Griffin Puatu, Sean Chiplock, Brittany Cox, Keon Young, Faye Mata, Christopher Swindle, Joe Ockman. It's a good English cast. I wasn't really expecting Johnny Young Bosch to be one of the main characters.
Yeah, no, I think he and Keith Silverstein are the two voices that I kind of recognize the most, but Netflix has really done a good job at keeping like a consistent troupe of really good young and old voice actors.
So yeah, I think SDI Media, Spliced Bread Productions, they've worked on plenty of Netflix dubs like B&A, Doro Hidoro, Beastars, High Rise Invasion, Record of Ragnarok. We'll see if we want to talk about that show on this podcast. Kengan Ashura. That explains why Keith Silverstein is in like a million of these. But I will say I do have some complaints. And it's not really with any of the action. The action's great. I am so happy that the action is so well done. And the CGI, well, it's Studio Orange, the studio behind Beastars. They know what they're doing at all times.
I have some complaints about the CGI, and we'll get there in a minute, but the one thing I don't have a complaint about are the actual monster designs. They all look very very unique, very distinct from like any previous iterations that we've seen. Like I kind of joked that Rodan kind of looks like he kind of looks like the Titan version, because when we first see him, he's got like, you know, he kind of looks all veiny and sort of inside out.
Yeah, meaty.
Yeah, very, very, very meaty. He
Yeah,
came like right out of Attack on Titan, but
yeah.
that design is cool. All of the like the transformations of Godzilla look like menacing. Like you do not want to get in his way.
Yeah, no, and Anguirus, I was so happy to see Anguirus. He's like one of my favorite Godzilla monsters. And like two of the best studios around to animate this stuff. It's a good combination, and it's obvious that the teams working on this had a lot of passion behind it. Now, I will say I did love the musical cues. Like the opening's pretty good.
Oh my
Um
god, yes.
the opening in case is performed by Bish, and I like the polka dot stingray ending theme, Owie. But what I mean by the music cues is that they take Kan Sawada, the composer of the show, who's done a lot of like Doraemon, Grave of the Fireflies, and such. He implements a lot of the original Godzilla music cues.
I was gonna say, like, even as someone who's not as familiar with Godzilla, I still once his theme kicks in, like I just kind of recognize it instantly.
Yeah, because they constantly play that dun 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 dun, like when Godzilla finally shows up, and then of course the battle music you have to have when the action sequences are happening. The dun 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 dun. Like it pumps me up because I grew up watching Godzilla. It's such an easy Easter egg, but I love it. And it's a lot more than what those terrible Netflix CGI films did, which they had nothing.
Oof.
But I will say, as much as I liked the deeper themes of like what this show was going for, the dialogue delivery, not like the voice performances, but just how the characters talked, were very much like they were just reading what they needed to read and or what they needed to say, and they came off like those obnoxious college students who are taking like philosophy courses and like they are know-it-alls. And I constantly like when the dialogue got a little too dense with all of with this like philosophical quandaries, I keep joking like, I just wanted to ask if you wanted Wendy's. Because it's
I'll
how they
say
talk, and
it,
it bugs me sometimes. But I still overall like the dialogue. But it's like none of you talk like natural people.
it kind of gets worse to some extent in the second half when the plot like really gets like super heady. At the start of the series, I'll say like Yun kind of comes off like very cold, very like almost robotic. The way he's the way he pretty much like predicts like the future and just everything that'll happen.
Yeah,
It's very inhuman the way he talks at first.
and I get it, and that's exactly why you needed Habaru and Goro, because you needed them to like kind of cut through that denseness. And then like May falls into that trap, and then you see BB talk, and it's like, oh my gosh, none of you talk like real people. It's that common trope of like jab at anime of just like none of you sound natural. I mean, it didn't detract all the way
No,
from
no,
like,
of course not.
but it got to that point where it's like, oh my gosh, we're heading into Ghost in the Shell territory. No. And I love Ghost in the Shell, so be quiet. I mean, that's really it. That's all I really had to complain about. I wish they added more monsters because I thought like at points I was like, oh, is that like Varen? Oh no, that's just another Godzilla transformation. Or it's like, oh, are they going to make other obscure references like they kind of do with the giant bugs by calling them Komongo, which is like a reference to the giant bug insects from Son of Godzilla, which
Hmm.
had the which there were the Kamacuras, which were the giant mantises, and then Komongo was this big spider like monster. But because then it's like, oh, so Rodan has been relegated to being like this pest like enemy. Like they needed a airborne enemy and they didn't want to make another monster. So
they just kind of copied and pasted Rodan like 5 million times.
yeah, and I get it though. It's not like Rodan. There's never been more than one Rodan. The first Rodan film had two of them. It's not impossible, and I get it. They shrunk down a lot of the monsters this time around. Like they're not as big as Godzilla, which is interesting because really Godzilla is played up as the major threat, which I think was smart. I think that was the point. That like yes, Rodan, Anguirus, Salunga are very much threats, but when Godzilla enters the scene, y'all better run.
One more thing before I elaborate on my negative. Generally speaking, do you prefer Godzilla as the hero or the villain? Or does it just kind of depend on the story?
It kind of depends on the story because Shin Godzilla and the original Godzilla portray him as the antagonistic force. This is what happens when we mess with nature and such, with advanced science that was really not meant to do half of this stuff, and then like, oh whoops, we dropped a bomb, an atom bomb, and well, Godzilla became came out of it, so oops. But I tend to like Godzilla as a hero. That's just me though. I grew up more on the Godzilla fighting other monsters side of the franchise, but I understand more people preferring when he's more the antagonistic natural force against man.
Just from the stuff that I've seen, I kind of side more towards you in that I like Godzilla as the hero, but if you're going to tell a story about the end of the fucking world, then yeah, what better antagonist than a very pissed off Godzilla?
I mean, yeah, you don't want a giant pissed off iguana coming after you. So, but yeah, what are these negatives that you have?
It's not much. It's just very like every once in a while, I feel like sometimes the CG monsters don't quite blend in with like the rest of like the 2D backgrounds and the human characters. I think there was one scene in like I can't remember if it was like episode 3 or 4 where like it just really like there was just really one scene that just felt really jarring. But other than that, for the most part, they do a really good job blending the two different mediums.
Well, like, would you have rather they went like full on CGI, like they went with Studio Orange or something instead of just using Studio Bones to animate the 2D sequences, or?
Actually, that's a good question. I don't know how would have. I think at the end of the day, this was probably the best stylistic choice by making the monsters CG. It adds like a level of intimidation. Like they literally feel out of this world. So I can understand like from an artistic perspective why they made that choice.
Honestly, the monsters being CGI was the best case scenario because there was no way these things were going to be animated 2D. Or if they were, get ready for a lot of still frames. There was no way they would have the time or the budget to hand draw half of these monsters. They are way too detailed. If you want an example of the polar opposites, you should look at Record of Ragnarok, because all the characters in that show are 2D and they're way too detailed to move fluidly. And either because of time, budget, talent, or resources, or whatever, a mixture of all, there's a lot of standing around. There's one use of CGI and it looks so much better than everything else in this. So to me, I don't mind the 2D CGI mix of Godzilla Singular Point. I just think you have to be careful with it. Like to me, and it should be obvious, when you're making a show, do you want it to be 2D or do you want it to be CGI? To me, if your characters are going to be fairly detailed, like in Kengan Ashura or Record of Ragnarok, it's best to make them CGI. Or Beastars, I think works, or like Dorohedoro. Like those work, but you need to have the right team, the right talent, and the right studios to make it.
Yep. It's all in the execution.
Because if you don't know what you're doing, you end up with an X arm. Boom!
And
Sorry.
nobody wants an X arm.
Yeah. Overall, I really enjoyed Godzilla Singular Point. I don't know if it would be in my top 20 anime of the season the year so far. We're about to hit into the summer season, so we'll have to see what happens there.
Yeah, I'm not ready to rank anime yet. There's still a lot that I have to finish, but
I put it in my top 30 maybe for now. Like I think if it had a better pacing with its dialogue and its like second half, I would have been more satisfied, but I still overall enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, I think overall, I'm not sure where I'd rank it yet, but I will say that this has been a very fascinating watch. It's one that I definitely want to continue. And one last thing I'll say before we move on: there's a post-credit scene at the end of episode 13, and yeah, I am far too excited for the possibilities.
There better be a second season because that's what they imply, especially with who shows up at the end and not just what they're working on shows up, but someone that you only got a little glimpse of in the main show. So it's really exciting. I hope they make a second season. I could at least see one more season.
Yeah, just one more and I'll be satisfied.
Pretty much. But we'll have to see what happens. Let's talk about one of the best animated films of the year so far from the big studios and just animation in general.
So, Luca is the directorial debut of Enrico Casarosa, and this film is written by Jesse Andrews and Mike Jones, who we'll get to in a minute. So the story is set in a beautiful seaside town on the Italian Riviera and follows a young boy named Luca experiencing an unforgettable summer filled with gelato, pasta, and endless scooter rides. Luca shares these adventures with his newfound best friend, Alberto, but all the fun is threatened by a deeply held secret. He is a sea monster from another world just below the water's surface. We'll start with the general impressions because there's a lot I have to say about this movie and about the ridiculous Pixar discourse that's happened over the past couple weeks. But Cameron, give me your general thoughts first.
Overall, I just adored Luca. I love this smaller scale story that Pixar wanted to do. And we'll talk about the Pixar discourse in a second. I found it utterly charming, very funny. I loved the characters. And the animation is just gorgeous. I love seeing a big studio say, let's make a Lilo and Stitch, or we'll talk about it in other great length, a Ghibli movie like My Neighbor Totoro, the Kiki's Delivery Service, that kind of thing. And I love that they did that. They just said, yeah, let's do it. Because, a lot of people are asking for studios to stop making big comedies or big action films and such. They want to see smaller stories. And, well, this is what it looks like. Now, it doesn't beat the Mitchells versus the Machines, but it's hovering around the second and third place spot on my list, having to contend with the Bears' famous invasion of Sicily. But otherwise, that's how I feel about it. Mike, what about you?
Where it falls on my list, it's like it's sandwiched in between the Bears' famous invasion of Sicily and Calamity, which is a very good spot to be in because this honestly really does kind of feel like it doesn't really feel like an American animated movie. I mean, not just because our director is Italian. This is almost a semi-autobiographical film about like summertime during his childhood, if his summer had sea monsters. But just like the whole vibe of this movie, Luca and Alberto's love for adventure, like the culture of the small town, the triathlon, which like the whole community kind of gets involved with. It's a very feel good coming of age story. As someone who is like 25% Italian, I loved pretty much all the scenes where they show plates of pasta, because for some reason animated food always looks better than like the real thing.
That's not fair. Come on, man.
I,
We can't eat that. I want it, and I'll look stupid trying to reach through the TV for it.
right? But there's so much to love from like I know this has been a recurring theme for me, but the water is great. The voice cast is terrific. I think like as like these kids get older, like Jacob Tremblay and Jack Dylan Grazer, they're given some of their best performances in these voice roles. And then you have the best like their newfound friend Julia, played by Emma Berman. She and the villain who really
Ercole Visconti, voiced by Severio Raimondo.
though I think these two kind of steal the show. But really the entire cast is terrific.
I really like Julia's dad, Massimo. He was my favorite character outside of the main two, of course. I think this might be Pixar's first major secondary character to be handicapped, like to be a focus and such.
Yeah. That's not nothing.
I mean, like, it's not a main character, but still, Like, I love his, like, when Alberto looks at his arm and he's just like, a sea monster ate it. And they freak out a little. And it's like, no, I came into this world like this. And it doesn't bother him. It's just like, he's not defined by his lack of another arm. Strong, he's got a good spirit about him. He's protective of his daughter, and
I think that's what kind of made me do a double take when first said that. Like, oh wow, he's a character in a fishing town, but he just has one arm and it's no big deal.
Yes, and I will say, while they aren't like the most groundbreaking parents in an animated film, I did like Daniela and Lorenzo, who are voiced by Maya Rudolph and Jim Gaffigan, Luca's parents. I mean, it's kind of tough and it's weird because we're in a year where we can say, like, compare Maya Rudolph mom performances. But I think she does a great job with Daniela. She's just like a worried mom. Humans are not the most understanding people on earth. We like to think we are, but we're not. At least not all of us.
They also get some of the biggest laughs too, because the way they're trying to find their kid, once they discover like what they become on the surface, they take advantage of the fact that like water kind of exposes their sea monsterness.
Yeah.
When they kind of interfere with a bunch of kids playing soccer, they almost become like bullies, and it's hilarious.
I love seeing Lorenzo see the first kid they notice, and then they just push him into water, and he's like, oh, whoops. Or like when they realize that they turn into humans when they come on land, Daniela beats the tar out of Lorenzo, and he's just like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, no, I deserved that one. I'm more awake right now. And then, of course, let's also talk about one of the two great side characters also, outside of Massimo and the parents. Grandma Paguro, voiced by Sandy Martin, who is just the best grandma ever.
Oh, yeah.
And Uncle Ugo, voiced by
Sacha Baron Cohen.
I didn't realize that was him at first. And then it's like, oh, wait, that is him. I just like the characters here. They're all very distinct and memorable to me. Now, Ercole is a very typical bully character, but his animation is very perky and very like on point. I love when he realizes that his fancy moped almost got scratched. He's like, well, someone's having a good day. And his stare is just like, I'm going to kill one of you, whoever caused my moped to almost break. While like, I don't think he's like the best Pixar villain or anything. He's still very amusing. It's just how pathetic he is.
He's not the best Pixar villain, but he might be the funniest. If for no other reason than how he abuses his his two idiot henchmen. They're kind of like the Horace and Jasper of this universe.
Yeah. CCO and Guido.
Both of them voiced by Peter Sohn and Lorenzo Krisky, respectively.
Yeah. By the way, if Peter Sohn sounds familiar, he was Squishy from Monsters University. Oh. And he's Emil from Ratatouille.
Okay.
And then this is the only voiceover credit Lorenzo Krisky has. They do a good job, but man, I have to say, I really love the fish animation that they give these fish people.
Mm.
Like when Luca is hesitant to go to the surface, and this is like after his being dragged up by Alberto, how he just moves back like to the tip, like to the top of the surface, to going back down to back, like back and forward. It's very fish-like, and they capture that mannerism of like if you've ever been in like a lake or the shallow parts of a beach and you've seen fish come up to you and like nibble on your skin, they're always kind of like, is this thing gonna hurt me? Maybe I'll come about. Okay, maybe I'll try again. Okay, Pixar is one of the top animation studios around for a reason. They capture these small mannerisms with between the humans and the fish people, and I love especially when Luca learns how to walk.
Yeah,
That's probably one of my favorite sequences.
I love that sequence.
Well, really, a lot of the early sequences with Alberto and Luca are just delightful. They feel like real friends, like really good friends. And I love like when they're makeshifting a moped, and Lucas is like, "Okay, I got to get going. Bye. Okay, bye.
2 hours later.
I
Okay.
really have to get going. Okay, bye." 40 minutes later. Okay, but this time I'm serious. I really have to get going. Okay, whatever. Then they finish up the moped. And I will say, I know a lot of criticism has been aimed at Luca because of the character designs. Because it doesn't look like traditional Pixar, even though Pixar, just like DreamWorks, do not have a set design philosophy. It's really whatever fits the story or who's working on the movie and such. I mean, really, you could say like the Toy Story universe does, but you wouldn't say a Toy Story human looks the same as a Ratatouille or like a Wall-E human or like a Soul human.
All right, since you brought it up, do you want to rip off the Band-Aid now?
I want to talk a few more details that I like. I like the bean mouth of like the kid characters. I think it gives them a very distinct look, kind of like an Aardman character look. I mean, really, that's kind of like what these designs remind me of. They remind me of Aardman characters.
Yep.
Not so much as like Sony characters that like I saw some early impressions of. They also have a few distinct little details, like especially like the hair details on like Luca and Alberto is very different. And I think that's very cool. They add a few more like motion blur effect. You know, like how if you watch the Mitchells versus the Machines, like they'll animate like brush strokes to be like the movement and such, like a punch or something. You get that like when Alberto and Luca are running down the hill, they'll sometimes do like a little blurring of the legs running. I just think that's very cool. And of course the dream sequences look amazing. Like when they're fantasizing about getting a moped, driving around, going into space. And there's this cute little detail that I didn't notice until I watched it a second time. When Luca thinks that there are sardines in the sky, aka the stars, because that's what Alberto says. When Luca gets knocked out, and instead of stars spinning around his head, they're little sardines.
Oh, that's a cool detail. Something else we haven't brought up yet is in the intro, Luca's job in the water. He's basically like an underwater sheep herder, and the fish that he tends to are basically water sheep.
And I know like some of them they all look the same, but you still get a distinct personality out of most of them, especially the one that's just kind of like, I'm gonna go away now. Bye. Like, dude, are you actually leaving? Maybe. Like there's a lot.
It's all in the eyes. The eyes give the personality.
I mean, it's just like this movie just has a lot of charm with its designs and personality and how they eat. Oh gosh, the cat. The cat is one of my favorite characters. Because it's hilarious how like suspicious the cat is at all times, and then when the cat finally realizes that they are fish people, or like when Alberto accidentally chucks the cat into the water, and then they cut to him like the cat being like mortified, like, oh my gosh, I'm in the water. Okay, I'm gonna kill you. Oh well, thank you for the fish. Like, man, this movie, man. And
also, was the cat like designed specifically to be, a twin of the father with the mustache and everything?
I'm sure, because sometimes you get those pictures of like, oh look, or it's like that 101 Dalmatian thing where the dog looks like the owner.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why I always get a kick out of that whenever I see it in animation.
Yeah, the cat looks like a cat version of Nick Offerman or like his Ron Swanson character from Parks and Rec.
Yep.
Man, it's just I love all the little details in the animation. But
Hold on,
yes,
one more thing before we get to that. I want to mention like the music composed by Dan
man.
Romer. I didn't know who composes at first. I thought it would have been like, I don't know, Michael Giacchino, because he does like everything. But no, seriously, the music is wonderful. It really does help set like the tone, and it just kind of adds to the atmosphere, and it just kind of feels, when you listen to the music, you kind of feel like you're in this town.
Well, it's like Ennio Morricone was supposed to, or was considered to do the soundtrack for Luca, but then he passed away last year. And Ennio Morricone, he did like The Hateful Eight. He did like the John Carpenter The Thing, Once Upon a Time in America, The Untouchables.
Dude's a legend.
Yeah, the dude's like one of the best ever. Or like Cinema Paradiso, Fistful of Dollars. The guy is amazing. And unfortunately, like I said, he passed away last year, July 6th. And Dan Romer was the composer behind films like Beasts of the Southern Wild, Beast of No Nations, Wendy from last year. Like, the guy's good. Like, he has this kind of whimsical, low-key side to him. And he also does the music for Superman and Lois, if you're curious.
I knew his style sounded familiar.
They also infuse a lot of Italian pop music and tunes from like Mina Edoardo Benato, Gianni Morandi, Rita Pavone, and Quartetto Citra. It feels so natural. It doesn't feel like ham-fisted or anything. It's really just a summertime playlist in Italy. But, okay, should we talk about the elephant seal in the room?
Absolutely.
You start.
I'm not going to name the outlet who published that article about has Pixar lost their touch, because I don't want to give them any more attention. But it really is just ridiculously unfair how high of a pedestal that Pixar is placed on, to the point where if a movie isn't like, the second coming of that, like that means their golden years are behind them, and like it's like the point of no return. And really, that's unfair. No studio should have to live up to that sort of pressure.
It's impossible for a studio to keep reinventing the wheel. And while I do understand the 2010 or the 2011 to 2020 lineup of films was not always the best from Pixar, because that's when we had like Cars 2, Brave, Monsters University, Good Dinosaur, Cars 3. And I'm sorry, I was not a huge fan of Incredibles 2, even though the family stuff was great. And even though you still had great movies like
Inside
Out, Coco, Soul, Onward, and such, there's definitely like a lapse of like something happened in between that period of Pixar, because it's like they had the impossible task of trying to follow up a decade of Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Finding Nemo, Monsters Inc., Incredibles, Ratatouille, Wall-E, Up. That's not fair. We don't do this with other studios. Disney has its ups and downs that were almost disastrous to it.
Mm-hmm.
We've had distributors who don't always put out the best movies, but we don't make a big deal about when they don't put it out. We don't say, oh, is A24 not picking the right movies? Or should G Kids have picked up Fireworks or whatever? Or Earwig and the Witch? But when Pixar, like when it comes to them, they are, you better reinvent the wheel, make me burst into tears, or change my life for the better, or it's a failure. It's lesser Pixar. And that's toxic and unfair to the people who work on these movies, who are already dealing with, from what the sounds of it were, a pretty hostile environment. We're going to see them change. We're going to see them expand into more stories and experiment a little. And that's healthy. If a studio can't experiment, like they have to keep making movies that make money, or else they'll keel over. Like what happened with Paramount, basically. Like after that, what was it, the Last Night Transformer movie? Like when that movie tanked on them, they just spiraled. That's not healthy. The fact that Pixar is able to do these ambitious, slightly more adult experimental films like Inside Out and Soul, and then follow it up with like this fun, low-key, charming movie with Luca, that's great. That's healthy.
Speaking of diversity, we'll get to the other elephant in a second, but I think another thing that rubbed me the wrong way about that article is that, you know, we've stressed the point about how Pixar shouldn't be held to this high of a standard, but it's also kind of ironic how we're seeing that article now as Pixar is entering a transitional period. You know, Pete Docter assumed the role left behind by Lasseter when he was removed from his position. So we're under a new regime. You know, Pixar's been doing those Spark shorts on Disney Plus, so they've been bringing in more outsider talent, which is good because in order for a company to grow and to expand, you need to have fresh new voices, because also that just makes for like better and more exciting story opportunities. So, you know, if we're going to keep insisting that Pixar reinvent the wheel and make a masterpiece every time, that's a lot of pressure to put on like these newbies, and that doesn't really create a healthy work environment.
Now, granted, the article in question is a podcast, and I did listen to it. Outside of the very, very clickbait title, I understand where they were coming from. I don't fully agree with it, but I understand it. But I do think if they were going to post something like this, they needed to do this back like 2017, like after Finding Dory and such, like when they were just about to do another Cars movie. And even though Cars 3 might be the somewhat best of that trilogy, it is like, man, Pixar, what happened? Because then right after that, we got Coco. And I know people loved The Incredibles 2, even though I don't think it's as good as the first film. But then we got like Toy Story 4, Onward, Soul, and now Luca. Most studios can't even dare to make something that consistent in quality. And I know some people are like, well, Toy Story 4 is pointless. Well, yeah, we're not talking about that right now. It's just like, if you're going to do this with Pixar, and I get it, Pixar is like, was the groundbreaker, the motivator to push more experiences in animation and what have you. But there's a lot more competition now, and no offense to Pixar or Disney, I love both of them, but some studios are pushing it more than them, like especially with Sony and Netflix. So we just need to treat them all equally, to me. But that's just how I feel about it.
And hell, those are just like the mainstream studios. We haven't even discussed, you know, places outside the US, like Cartoon Saloon in Ireland,
like Studio Chizu, Studio 4C, and like even like Studio Ghibli doesn't get this kind of like, are Ghibli out of touch? Granted, a lot of their movies are still pretty good and consistent, with only a drop when, no offense, when Goro Miyazaki was introduced as a director. But we don't say like, is Ghibli out of touch? No. It's probably best for them to actually experience a little failure. Yeah, heck, like some of the films did not do well on their side of things. And then they pick it right back up with like Spirited Away and what have you. Because from what I remember, I don't think Princess Mononoke, even though it's like their most acclaimed film, did not do well at the box office. And
it's never usually talked about as like a financial success. It's one of those critical darlings.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I understand. Pixar kind of definitely hit an inconsistent quality marker in the 2010s, but they're still pretty good. That podcast still does say like, but they're still pretty good. But yeah, people shouldn't be expecting them to keep reinventing the wheel or inventing a new way for it to rain or something, like over California or something. I don't know. But that's all I have to say about that.
One other thing I'll add is that even some of Pixar's worst films are still better than other studios' best. So we can all have our opinions about the studio, but I think on the whole, they're going to be okay.
Yeah, they're perfectly fine. They're not going. Disney can't afford to let go of Pixar. Like, there's a reason why they bought them, because people might not remember. Disney tried to make CGI animated films for a few years, and it failed on them hard. Like, Disney probably would have died in some way, shape, or form during the 2000s.
That's
Because
a
they were
scary thought.
dealing with, granted, I'm saying this as like there aren't already more important issues to criticize Disney for. I'm just saying, like, in perspective, Disney had like bomb after bomb after bomb after bomb after bomb during 2000s. They soiled their reputation and their films and also there are just 100 other reasons like why 2D animation stopped. But part of it was them. They lost track of who they were as a company and did not put out good films, or at least satisfying films. I know a lot of people love Atlantis and Treasure Planet, but and then like they tried to do their own CGI films, and while they were sort of financially successful, they are considered some of Disney's worst movies, like Chicken Little. And I know a lot of people like Meet the Robinsons, but come on. In 2007, that wasn't the best movie of that year.
No.
I think let's move on.
Okay, yeah, there's a couple other things to talk about. One is actually kind of ironic. When people are negatively comparing this movie to Studio Ghibli, like calling this Ghibli light, I kind of laugh because one of the screenwriters, Mike Jones, worked on the English adaptations for The Wind Rises and The Tale of Princess Kaguya. Like, it's just kind of amusing how like the writer of two Studio Ghibli films is kind of like caught in the crossfire of negative Ghibli comparisons.
Yeah, no, I think some people are judging this a little too harsh, because at the end of the day, while this film does have very Ghibli elements to it,
it's still mostly its own identity.
I still want it to be a Pixar film. I don't want them to try to be like, really, that's when a studio starts to fail, is when they start trying to be like other studios. That's what happened to Warner Brothers Animation in the 90s and the 2000s. They tried to copy Disney and failed hard a lot. And then that's what happens when the Iron Giant flops, because it was the best movie of that year and no one went to see it because WB put out a bunch of terrible movies because they were trying to be like Disney.
And to be fair, there's nothing wrong with wearing your influences on your sleeve. Like, everyone, like a lot of our favorite filmmakers have said before that like Hayao Miyazaki is like one of their biggest influences, and hell, even Miyazaki was like a Walt Disney fanboy in his youth.
Miyazaki like birthed the way most Japanese animated films want to be. Like, they want to have that Ghibli spark. For it to come back to Luca is not a shock. I think a lot of studios and people working at like Pixar, DreamWorks, Illumination, and such want to make films that have the vibes of the stuff from overseas, like Ernest and Celestine or Mirai or Wolf Children, where it's like it's smaller scale, it's not super comedy focused, and we can just let the characters live in the world. Because that's what it means to me to be like a Ghibli film. You take your time, you let the characters bamf around a little, and you just let the animators flex, and you just let the characters live within their own world.
Yeah.
With that
said,
that is my one problem with this. Well, I have two problems with this movie. One, and it's really the one thing that everyone has said, so it's not like what I'm saying is anything unique. If they wanted to be like a Ghibli film, they should have made this film 30 minutes longer. It's well paced at 90 minutes.
Sure.
But it would have been nice for them to just live within the town instead of just having to feel like they had to push the story forward. And I mean, that's how we got some of the best Ghibli films. That's how we got Kiki's Delivery Service. Like I said, Miyazaki storyboarded his films first before writing an overall like script and such.
And you can really tell the few movies that I've seen. Like Castle in the Sky is a great example of, it's an action movie, sure, but you also get time to live in that world.
And we'll see plenty of that when we get to like some of his other films like My Neighbor Totoro and again,
Porco Rosso.
And Porco Rosso and Kiki's Delivery Service. Like Ghibli is really good at doing that, and so is our studios like Chizu and Science Saru, and that's really like it would have just been nice for Alberto and Luca to enjoy more of the summer instead of having to train for the third act conflict triathlon. I mean, it's like it's well paced. The conflict is a lot more set up than a lot of Ghibli films, no offense, but just let them live in the world a little more. That's all like I want to see. Like these characters are great. I love the little girl and Luca and Alberto. I love them hanging out and such. I love seeing Luca and Julia just walk around on the rooftops looking at the stars and such. There's a lot of charm to that. It would have even been nice to see like Luca's parents kind of be like, hey, you know what? This ain't so bad being up here. Because then it's like when you get to the third act, it is very like, I'm not going to say predictable, but the conflict doesn't feel well paced.
It does kind of feel like a literal race to the finish line. Something I imagine that might have made the climax feel a little better paced is, like we said, if this movie tacked on like another 30 minutes, you could have spent more time with like, say, the volunteers who are working on this at this triathlon. Like you could have explored more of the town. We could have seen more pasta dishes. There's a lot that you can do, with more screen time. And I think perhaps this isn't specifically a criticism of Pixar, but American animated films in general is, have you noticed that, like, barring a few exceptions, they almost feel like obligated to hit that 90-minute mark?
Yeah, no, they're obligated to try and hit a traditional story rhythm. And not to say they need to do something like Pulp Fiction and change the continuity of the story or anything like that. They need to maybe start leaning towards just slowing down a bit. They don't need to constantly push the story forward. Unless it gets to a point where it's like, okay, well, what are the stake and what have you, but still, like, you don't need to do it for every film, but sometimes there are moments where it does feel like a lot of American animation just pushes the third act to get to the end. Not that like every story is rushed or anything like that, but you get the idea.
Yeah, and the only reason why this ending feels a little bit rushed is we just didn't feel like we spent enough time in this town.
And the ending is very sweet because there are a lot of themes with this movie about like self-discovery, childhood friendship, like discrimination and acceptance. But we've seen that before, and unfortunately, because of the world we live in right now, it's going to stay a timely theme of discrimination and what have you. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there was a way to keep the small scale story vibe all the way through without having some kind of conflict to kick the third act into gear, or like the fifth act, or depending on how you tell your story. But it is like you get what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. It's predictable, even though it's still great. I love it, and I love little details that they put in, like at the end, like when the camera is panning out, you see Luca's dad go up to the girl's dad to kind of like befriend him and such, and it's really cute. It's a small little detail, and you'll blink and you'll miss it. And I guess we should talk about the ongoing discussion about something else about this film. And you'll probably reference this video at the end with your recommendation. There's an ongoing discussion of whether Luca is an LGBT plus story because of the metaphors with the monsters, the discrimination. There are literal elements that you can take away from the sea monsters turning into humans and being among humans, but then if the humans find out they're sea monsters, they're hated, and then at the end they are accepted. And while the director said, no, it's none of that, because, early on when this film was announced, everyone was like, oh, it's Pixar meets Call Me By Your Name, even though now that joke is extremely tasteless
Yeah.
because of it wasn't even my favorite movie at all. But then with all the stuff going on with one of the actors, yeah. So let's stop doing those comparisons now, please. And yes, I take the word of the director that he just wanted to have a more just childhood memories of friendships and what have you. But I also think people are going to interpret art wildly differently from other people. And I can see a lot of people from the LGBTQ plus communities taking away those elements from some parts of this film.
And just to add to that, just because the director says like, "Oh, this is just a movie about friendship," because I think he also kind of clarifies that it's not that this is not a gay love story. It's just not a love story, period, because he says this is like before puberty, before girlfriends, boyfriends, all of that stuff like complicates things. That's fine, but just because it's not a love story, that doesn't mean it can't also be interpreted as a queer coming of age story because of the things that we talked about. The strong and anti-bigotry message, even like coming up to the surface is some sort of metaphor for
coming out.
Coming out or transitioning or anything of that sort.
The director's not going to, well, hopefully he's not going to be like, no, y'all, you're misreading my movie. Stop it. Your theories are all invalid. He's not going to say anything like, he's not that kind of guy. It's what you take away what you want from this movie. And you don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. Whether you take it as a super close friendship between two boys or as a queer coming out or a queer romance story, because art is interpreted in many ways. It's subjective. Don't make me tap the sign.
I know we all kind of make fun of the English teacher who reads too much into everything, but as silly as it can be when we say like, oh, the red door represents pain and despair, and the author says it's a red door. As much as we make fun of that, art can be interpreted however you want.
Yeah, but in general, Luca is just fantastic. I want to see Pixar do these smaller scale stories more often because then it's like if they try to reinvent the wheel every single time, it becomes less special when they do. So let them tell these smaller stories. Be more open to that, because if that happens, you might make a change of how these studios run their animation houses. Who knows?
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Yeah.
My final thoughts on Luca are: this movie is just delightful. It's one of those perfect summertime films that just kind of distill all the best parts of growing up and hanging out with your best friend during the summer. If you're, whether you are of like Italian descent or your parents are immigrants or whatever, I'm sure this movie will reach like a very wide audience. Now, moving forward, I want to see Pixar continue to, hire new voices, experiment with different types of storytelling, and hell, maybe even experiment with different styles of animation. One of the biggest missed opportunities is Pixar not following through with their stop motion collaboration with Henry Selick. That would have been something amazing.
Yeah, no, it's like they should have the clout by now to start experimenting a lot more, and Disney needs to let them do that. You hear that, Disney? You let your studios and your teams of super talented people that you need to make sure you're all paying respectfully and a lot, that are making these movies for your bottom dollar. Let them off the leash a little. Let them experiment. Let them try out to make films that you'd see from overseas. Maybe try out 2D animated films every once in a while, or stop motion, or CGI art styles that, no offense, that Sony Pictures Animation beat you to the punch with.
And also, don't be afraid of actually telling authentic stories, about and featuring like prominent marginalized voices.
Exactly. I would like to recommend a few films that are in the similar vein of Luca. And now these are all G Kids films. I think some of them are getting sent to the Criterion channel.
Ooh.
I recommend a few. A Cat in Paris, which is this cool, stealthy action adventure heist movie that's very low key and just has a fantastic art style and atmosphere. It's also got Steve Blum. You know how much I love Steve Blum. Another one is called A Letter to Momo, which is about a young girl moving to a new small town after the loss of her father and befriending 3 yokai. And I've recommended this one before, but I feel like it fits along perfectly because it's about her living in the summer and a supernatural element to it. Aya of Yop City, I think, is also heading to Criterion, and it's a film that takes place in 1970s Africa. And it's just these characters living their life, just living like normal people. And that's just so cool. And for my final recommendation, I'm going to recommend the Masaki Yuasa classic, which we'll need to find time to review, Lou Over the Wall, because it's another coming-of-age seaside story. I know a lot of people like to compare it to Ponyo, but it's not Ponyo. It's nowhere near Ponyo. Please stop making that comparison. Those are my recommendations that are... I'm like the Netflix category of like, you watch this, so you might like this.
I don't have nearly as many film recommendations. My one TV recommendation for those who are keeping up with the Owl House, I'm not going to spoil anything because I don't know, Cameron, if you're caught up, but the most recent episode, Echoes of the Past, is probably one of Alex Hirsch's best performances as King and as Hootie. It's one of the funniest and saddest episodes so far this season. And just season 2 in general is off to a damn good start. If you're trying to get caught up on the show, now is a good time when things are really ramping up. As for my YouTube recommendation, there's a YouTuber by the name of Laron Reedus. He is a gay black YouTuber who has covered Luca on two different videos. One is kind of like his speculation video that came out, just before the film was released and after one of the trailers. And then the second one is all about Julia, how she's portrayed as like the ally of our 2 lead characters. Those are our recommendations. This week we weren't able to get to the Ghibli journey, but to make up for that, we'll be covering 2 films next week, along with America the Motion Picture. We'll be doing
Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, and then we're going all the way forward to The Wind Rises.
Yeah. Basically, we're doing the how it started to how's it going meme with Miyazaki next week.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that's a wrap for today. Before we head out of here, Cameron, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at CamsEyeView. I have my own website called camseyeview.biz where I review animated films and shows called The Other Side of Animation. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/camseyeview. If you like my work, you can support me there.
And you guys can find me on Twitter at CaptainK42. You can check out all my quick thought reviews on letterboxd.com/CoachK42. You can find me in all the various Facebook groups just at my name. You can check out Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and Twitter at Ren Pop Culture. You can also find us on Podchaser. You can check out all of our previous podcasts on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. And last but not least, check out renegadepopculture.com. That's where you'll find everything from podcasts to editorials to videos. Need an escape? So do we. That'll do it for this installment of Renegade Animation. Thank you guys for joining us, and we will catch you guys later. Peace out.
Bye.